while since I did a Q&A video. I've been very busy with recording, as you probably know, but it's going to be great to reach out and connect with you guys and answer your questions. So this is the third Q&A video, and there are a lot of questions related to recording, which is quite pleasing because I like talking about that, and I like that you're asking about it as well, and just some technique questions as well. So let's get started right away. Number one, this is from Costas Kontos. Now, I hope I'm saying that correctly. And you ask about perfectionism in recording. It's something I struggle with all the time. I want my stuff to sound ultra precise, almost as if it was programmed. Yeah, I know what you mean. While it is good for refining skills, it stresses me out sometimes, and it's one of the reasons I don't record as much as I would like. Thoughts? So, perfectionism in recording. I know you want everything to be perfect, right? Because that's what you hear on albums. Just perfect recording. And I think it's kind of like young women looking at models in magazines and stuff. They see this level of perfection which can be kind of unattainable sometimes, or it's dishonest or artificial. Let me explain this to you. See, when I was recording my first album, Argonaut, I distinctly remember in the track Synesthesia of Space and Time, where there was a solo section in that where my technique just wasn't good enough. This was like 6 years ago. My technique wasn't good enough to nail that solo first time or even second time. And I remember spending like an hour and a half recording take after take of this solo until I finally got it. And when I finally nailed it, I didn't feel good. And I realized it was because I had been dishonest. It wasn't an accurate representation of my playing at that time. So my advice on perfectionism in recording is, if it's taking you take after take, hour after hour, then perhaps you should compose something a little easier that you can play on the first or second or third take. And there's no shame in that. Like, I've done that on my album that I'm recording right now. And in general, my approach to recording this new album of mine is based on like a 1, 2, 3, or even 4 take system. As in, if I can't record a solo within my first, second, third, or fourth take, I'll just make something slightly easier. I'll change it round. I'll change some notes around so that I can play it. Because I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be happy if I recorded a solo and it took me all day to do it. That would be a stain on that track for me. But I'm a little bit dramatic. So I hope that answers your question about perfectionism. Just be honest to yourself and to the people who listen to your music. And don't worry about mistakes. I leave my mistakes in. They give it character. They give it a very human touch. I know you want it to be programmed, like it's programmed in, but I think the human touch and the mistakes gives a nice human nuance to your recordings. So thanks very much for that. Okay, question number 2. This is from Maurice. How long did you take to start composing, and how was the process? Also, how do you do now? Tell the process. I mean, do you just sit and think of a riff, a melody, and then the song is there? That sort of thing. Thank you. No, that's not how that works. I wish it were that simple, but it's not that simple. But let's start with the beginning of your question. How long did you take to start composing, and how was the process? So I began playing guitar in 2007. And it was 2009, so 2 years later, that I bought my first USB interface with the goal of beginning recording. Now, when I started out, I would just import pre-made drum loops, drop it into a track in Ableton, and then I just stack tracks on top, like acoustic guitar, rhythm guitar, basic leads. And so my composing process was just kind of like cobble together some drum loops and then make a bit of noise on top. It was very primitive. But you've got to start at the bottom like that. you got to start out making very simple stuff, and then it gets more and more complex. And your music at first isn't going to be any good at all, but you just got to push on through it and accept that it will get better. Right, so my process now for when I'm composing music. Do I just sit there and think of a riff? Yeah, well, kind of. What I'll do is I will actually. How can I answer this? I have to gather inspiration before I even start thinking of a riff. So, if I know that I'm going to be composing and recording a song at some point soon, what I'll do is I will gather inspiration songs. That's what I call them. I think I've spoken about this before. So if I want my track to be in the style of a particular artist, and even more specific, these songs by that particular artist, like I love the way those songs sound, and I want to capture that feeling and recreate it, I will create a folder on my MP3 player. Yes, that's how old I am. I don't use my phone as a music player. I still have an MP3 player. Anyway, I'll collect those songs on my MP3 player, and I will just listen to those songs for like a month. And it sounds crazy, but that's what I do. And my mind absorbs the sound of those songs, and it makes it so that when I go to work on my track, composing or recording, the riffs automatically kind of come out in that style. It's like concentrated inspiration. And so yeah, I just play with I record a riff, and I drop in some drum tracks, like separate drum hits on separate tracks, and I just try and match them up and come up with a good riff. The melodies I usually do mid to late when composing a track. I try to build up my riffs and my drum tracks and my synths first, and then put melodies and licks and solos later on. Wow, I hope I answered that question. That's a pretty tough one, actually. A lot of these are quite tough, but I hope I answered your question, Maurice. Number 3. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Is it Denise? I'm so uncultured, I'm sorry. What is the best way to develop finger independence, especially pinky finger? Yes. Well, let's see. When you're talking about the two hands, the picking hand is the one which typically has all the problem because of all those challenges and the mechanics and the movements and the pick slant changes and the countless ways that you can generate pick strokes. The picking hand is going to give you the grief. Now for me, my fretting hand never gave me any trouble because right from the beginning I set my strings nice and low and I just, pressed the string against the frets. I never really I never had any problems with the fretting hand. But I understand that a lot of people do have trouble with the fretting hand, the pinky in particular, like you said. And I came up with an exercise for this, and it is lead guitar exercise number 2. So that's using the diminished scale. And you can't help but use the pinky when you're playing through the diminished scale. So, in fact, when I'm just doing my scale sequencing, I'm doing picking practice day to day, and I'm going to do it after this video, I always pick through the diminished scale just because of the fingering, how it works. It's such a great way of developing finger independence, as you asked, because you're alternating between 1, 2, 4 and 1, 3, 4 every time you move to a new string. I'm sure future me put that up on the screen at some point during that rant. Play through the diminished scale and check out lead guitar exercise number 2. That'll help you out. Okay, track. Question number 4. Catalin. Always good to hear from you, buddy. What is your approach when writing an EP or album? How do you organize your parts? How do you write things that seem connected? Okay, that's tough. well, across tracks, how I make things seem connected is I deliberately I create motifs or recurring themes, things, reprises, where I borrow certain parts of tracks from other tracks, and I weave them together so that you can be listening to one track, and then later on you'll listen to another, and you'll hear, oh wow, I remember that theme from like 3 tracks back, and that kind of makes all the tracks sound like they all belong on the same album, and you can tie the tracks together like that. For instance, in my album that I'm working on now, near the end of track number 4, The Impossible Encounter, there's that creepy diminished melody or riff or melody, which track number 7, Phantasms, is all about. And so you'll hear like a teaser of it in track number 4, and then in track number 7 you'll be like, oh wow, I remember that. That's foretelling. How do you organize your parts though? So I suppose you mean within an individual song. If you've heard me speak about my recording process and my composing process in the past, you'll know that it's very chaotic, very inefficient, and it's just all over the place. So sometimes I'll spend like a week working on a section, and I'll intend it to drop right into the middle of the track after a certain riff, and then I'll decide that I don't actually think it works there. So I'll scoop the whole thing up and put it off far to the side where it's not actually involved in the song anymore. It's just sitting off to the sideline. And I'll come up with something new. And okay, that works in that place now. And then every now and then what I'll do is I'll go to those parts, those retired parts on the right, and I'll scoop it up and I'll just place it down somewhere to see if it works. Honestly, this is how haphazardly I put my songs together. I'll just drop in a section that I made earlier, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes it inspires me to create a similar section that would work. So, in short, I have no idea what I'm doing, and you shouldn't be asking me questions, because I'm not entirely sure how helpful I'm going to be, but no, hopefully I can get you thinking about these sorts of things. All right, question number 5. We're on. 2 and 1. What's your experience after the recording of 2 CDs? And tips for better composition process. My experience after the recording of 2 CDs. Well, my first one, okay, yeah, I think I know where I can go with this. Let's just talk about mix and mastering of the 2 CDs. So the first one, every time I'd make a new track, it would just be from scratch. I wouldn't keep any of the EQ, any of the mixing from previous tracks. And so the first album of mine sounded all over the place because every track had its own mix, its own EQ. It was very, very strange. But I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. So there you go. What I've learned from that, and what I introduced into my second album, was mixing and EQing and panning and all that ahead of time. So I began my second album in 2019, and all of January I didn't actually record anything. I didn't record anything all of January. Instead, I went about gathering instruments. So I found a bass VST that I liked. I found drum samples that I liked. I developed a rhythm guitar tone that I liked, and a lead tone, multiple lead tones, and synths and choirs. I gathered all of the instruments that I wanted to use to be like the character or the personality of the entire album. And then what I did is I just started panning and EQing all of those instruments. And then at the end of the month, I put together like a quick little demo just for my sake, where I tested it all out. Did I like how the mix sounded? And I did. I made a few tweaks, but I did. I liked how it sounded. And And so now every time I make a new track for my second album, I open that template and I just start recording. And I know, because I'm using the same template every time, that the tracks are going to sound very similar, as in they're going to sound like they belong on the same album. And that's the kind of thing that I've learned just from, as experience after the recording of 2 CDs. That setting up your mixing and mastering and EQing and panning, it's a great idea to do that ahead of time. And that makes the composition process easier. What else can I say about that? I'm not sure I answered your question. Sorry, I don't really know where to go with that. But I hope that helped you out. In fact, what I gave you then was probably one of my best recording tips that I know of. So, yeah, have that. All right, the last one. Question number 6. Now, again, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. I really hope I am. Sutirtha Mitra. Hey, first of all, thank you for such good tutorials. You're precise, to the point, no BS instructions. Help me pick up the sweep technique. Well, I'm glad I could help. That's what I'm here for. Just serious, technical tutorials and licks. Yeah. Okay, what's your suggestion on putting it all together, such as incorporating sweep, string skip, tapped arpeggios, etc., in actual playing? There are players like me who have just picked up those techniques and can play up to speed, but get a bit thrown off while implementing it to, say, for example, in an improv. Thanks in advance. All right? So, here's the thing about guitar, and I imagine a lot of things in life. The most direct way to get good at something is to practice that exact something. So, your question is, how can you incorporate multiple techniques into your playing, at once? The answer is to practice implementing multiple techniques into your playing at once. So I can just come up with something right now. Maybe once a week, what you should do is just find a jam track that you like. This is a great system. I use this all the time. Find a good jam track that you like. And then just start composing a lick. It doesn't have to be a solo. It can just be a lick, which uses sweeping and tapping and string skipping and whatever else you want to throw in there. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, just come up with a lick which uses multiple techniques. And it might be difficult at first. You might not like the first one you come up with, but the idea is that you keep doing this. And like the next week you'll get a new jam track and you'll come up with a new lick and you'll practice that. And then, you just do that again. New jam track, come up with a new lick. And then what you should do is just put on a fresh jam track that you haven't worked on before and just start improvising. So just start playing, making up a solo on the spot. And then try and throw in some of these multiple technique licks. And you'll find that now that you've been working on them, that they've somewhat become a part of your technique, a part of your playing repertoire. So, yeah, as I always say, practice what you're bad at. Or, practice what you want to be able to do as well. Work towards your goals directly. It really is the best way to get there. Okay, this has been Q&A number 3. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed the intelligent and the thought-provoking questions from you. You'll be hearing from me soon. I've got some exciting news to be announcing in the next week or so. Yeah, so good luck with your practice. Yeah, I'll see you soon.